I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everyone, do we have some historical inaccuracies in this episode of Outlander? We're going to talk about that and more and everything that's going on with the Frasers. Joining me today, Lee Broadway.
Hi everybody, shout out to all our Outlander fans and all the Outlander folks who are watching tonight. Share your comments and thoughts with us during the show. We'd love to hear from you, and lots to talk about this evening.
We have a ton. We were actually talking before the show started, so we're just going to keep going in the conversation, and we'll bring you guys up to speed. But I'm going to put this book down before I... I'm going to also be looking at the chat, so I just want to give a shout out to Elizabeth Brown, as always, who has, I call her our resident reader because she's always giving us information about the book. I've been reading The Fiery Cross as well, so we're going to do our page to screen segment at the end where we go more in detail and break down the differences, but I'm just giving you guys fair warning. I am going to talk a little bit about the books up front because it ties into the conversation we've been having, which is about the baby. Now, Lee, do you want to tell everyone at home what we were talking about and your thoughts on?
Yes,
so far?
We're discussing the historical significance of a white woman having a baby, probably by a slave or perhaps a former slave who is still working on someone's property, and the way it's being handled in the storyline. Clearly, this is the South in 1743. It appears that the storyline is a little too polite, I believe, for the historical references. You know, they're taking the baby in, they're loving the baby like it's a normal occurrence for a white woman to have a baby by a slave. In all honesty, the slave would probably have been flogged, killed. The baby would not have been accepted. You know, the way we're seeing in the storyline. And the woman, Fanny, would probably have been banished and or, if her husband knew, killed in some instances. So
now, all I want to say about the book is that when we see the baby, and we talked about this last week because when we were talking about our page to screen, the events are a little bit out of order in the book, but one of the things they say is that Claire says, oh yes, the baby looks white, and that I don't know if that changes things, but I just wanted to note that that's how they handled it in the book. It still feels insensitive from my perspective too. I was a history major in college and I focused on the Civil War, so to me, my problem with it's not so much Jamie, because I believe he would react that way. My thought is with Claire, knowing what she knows from the 1960s, how is she just willingly saying, here's the baby who is half black, let me just give the baby up, knowing, like, my fear is that she's going to leave the baby in someone's hands, and even if the person is a good person and takes care of the baby, someone else is going to take this baby and, you know, do something terrible. The other thing they don't mention in the show is that in the books, when Jamie and Claire, the moment in the woods where they're talking about how to handle the baby in the show, there's an extra piece of dialogue in the book that basically says, oh yes, if you're by English law, if you were born even out of wedlock, you still inherit the husband's estate. It becomes yours. So obviously they're saying whoever the baby ends up with, the baby will still also get Beardsley's estate.
In all honesty, that probably wouldn't occur simply because blacks at that time were not considered to be, full citizens. They were essentially property. And in most cases, they didn't own anything. In all cases, blacks didn't own anything of their own. They worked the land. They were basically property of their owners. And for a baby who's half black to inherit all of the estate of the father, you know, assuming the Beardsleys had stayed together and he lived, that's highly unlikely, historically speaking.
I agree. And we have Robin O'Neill says they touch on that in the book, that in the backcountry it was more acceptable because Indians and other races do marry and have kids. Now, I understand what you're saying, Robin. From what I've read in the book so far, they don't quite, they probably explain it just beyond what I've read, but in my only problem with that is if we're going by English law, my thought would be that English law would, at that time, would not have supported this for the reasons we've been talking about. And just to note for anyone who isn't familiar with history with this, the English slave trade was still going on at this time. So it wasn't until the early 1800s that it stopped.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we most likely would not have seen that child inherit any property because he was still considered property. And the assumption would have been that the child would have been a full, blooded baby,
Yeah.
of the father. So I don't think when the law was written, I'm certain it wasn't written with blacks in mind at that point in terms of them having full, rights and so forth to anything because they didn't own anything at that time.
Yeah.
They were property.
Yeah, and so I think it's just, to me, I'm with you there. The whole episode, as they were trying to find a place for the baby, I was very unnerved and unsettled, especially knowing what happens. This is North Carolina.
The South.
Yes.
In the 1700s.
If this was from Claire's era, like with Jim Crow, like that would still, not,
even still in the 50s and 60s, we know what the African Americans were experiencing. We were still having lynchings and discrimination. Many of the laws weren't passed yet. So the Civil Rights Act and so forth. So we know that what we're seeing in the book doesn't really mirror reality, but it's a book, and I think it's good that we're seeing something positive. I think we need to see that, but I think it's important also when you're looking at a period piece to consider historical significance and the details, what life would have really been like at that time.
Absolutely. So I'm going to read one more comment, and then after that we'll dive in a little bit more and talk, more specifically about what happened this episode outside of that. Nina Murphy says, "You didn't see any other blacks in that town to show their acceptance of them. I think it was just fortuitous that the family lost a baby." So, okay, I see her point with it happening to just that a family was there and they were looking to adopt, but... okay, so let's dive in and talk about Roger, Captain Roger, and his run-in. It's funny because they were it's interesting because we quickly meet Alicia and a character named Morton. How did you feel about this moment with Roger and also meeting these two new characters? Meeting the one new character.
Well, I think the whole scenario, Roger was caught off guard, with the attack.
Yeah.
And the way he was received, he wasn't received well. And then the two characters, I feel my heart just breaks for the girl because she's in love with this man who's married. And she doesn't feel like there's anybody else out there for her. He's clearly a scoundrel.
Yeah.
So there's no hope for the relationship, obviously, under those circumstances.
At least it appears that he's a scoundrel. And I found it interesting because especially when I think of Claire and Jamie and everything they've been through, like Jamie, when he was married to Leary, I mispronounced that. Sorry, everybody. When he was married to Leary and Claire first came back through the stones after she came back to the past and found out he had been married. So when I saw all this playing out and I heard that Morton was married, but I also saw just from that one brief clip of how much he seemed to actually love Alicia, it just seemed like I felt like Claire and Jamie were watching a younger version of themselves in a way.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Certain things were different. Like, we're not going to see Claire try to take her life, obviously, but I just found it almost like they were watching, a young couple mirror them from bygone days. And
yeah, a little bit. I think, Claire's heart is breaking for Alicia because she knows what it's like, the pangs of love and wanting to be with that person so much.
And not only that, but she's pregnant, too.
Yeah, she thinks she's pregnant.
Yeah.
So now we have another, a difficult situation.
Yeah.
Seems like there are babies. Lots of babies.
Lots of babies.
This season.
Yeah. But it was just, I kind of knew that, I watched the show before I read up to speed, read up to the place where I need to be. So watching it, I kind of knew that Morton was going to come back, even though they had told him to leave. Bless you.
Excuse me, thank you.
And I think what I found interesting is that Claire was so quick to call Morton a scoundrel.
Yes, well.
But it was a very tender moment. Like, when I see Claire just so lovingly embrace someone,
yes.
yeah, like, it's like, okay, like, she's such a nurturer.
She has such a mothering spirit, and she's just loving.
She brought in a baby that wasn't hers. She's trying to find the baby a home. There's a young woman who is struggling, and Claire's there for her, and it's just, it's very...
a tender moment.
It's so tender. It's very emotional. It just makes me, like, really... Claire is one of my favorite characters, just for the fact that she is that loving towards people she doesn't even know.
I think she really balances the whole show
Yeah.
because of her spirit. She's just so kind and welcoming and forgiving and all the good things that we like to see in people.
Yeah.
She she exudes that kind of, character, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, we've been getting this last episode, the last 2 episodes, we did get some Jamie and Claire moments, and this particular episode, what we got, so Roger believes that the best way to handle this is by giving the Browns Morton. And so when Jamie shows up, he's like, when he finds out about this, he's like, what?
What did you do?
and he's like, he's berating Roger pretty much. And then on like the same breath, he says, okay, well, we find out that the 2 twins from last episode, that they both need their tonsils out. Yeah. And so when we find out that Claire has to leave, now Jamie's like, okay, well, Roger, take Claire back. And what I found interesting about that moment is that Roger... it was so quick to assume that Jamie is sending him back because he doesn't believe in him. And Jamie's definitely treating Roger this way. But Claire reminds him, no, he just gave you the person he loves most. You're in charge of that.
Protecting her.
Yeah.
Roger and Jamie are just 2 different people.
Yeah.
Completely different. I think Jamie is thoughtful about his decisions. Roger, I think, is a little more impetuous and free-thinking and freewheeling.
Well, they're really playing up the fact, like, especially this episode where Roger brought in World War I. And here's my thing. I love history, so I wanted Roger to, like, beyond just one line, I wanted Roger to actually, like, give him more of an in-depth, like, conversation. But one of the things that the producer said at the end of this episode when they were talking is that they were showing that just because you study history and know a lot about it does not make you somebody who can handle what the type of decision you need to make when it comes down to actually being part of history. And so for Roger to kind of decide, okay, well, let's give them the man they want. It's gonna, like, he had like a moral decision to make. Do I potentially hurt all of my men or just give them one? But also, Jamie made a really good point that Roger had enough men to take on Brown. So it was like Roger just made a mistake is what it seems to
It just seems like Roger can't make the right choices when it comes to Jamie.
Yeah.
They don't seem to agree upon how to handle situations.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about the book because they handle this differently completely. But just another reminder that we're going to get there, and I'm figuratively dying right now to talk about it. Okay, we get Roger making this decision, Jamie not being happy with it, and then as all of this is happening, one kind of like break in the episode when we kind of have like a plot B going on is the situation with Brianna and Jemmy. And what we don't know is whether or not so Jemmy goes missing. Yeah. And it almost feels like it's Stephen Bonnet.
That's exactly what I thought, that he showed up in the middle of the night. He wanted to see his son, and he was probably there for a little while, and then he left.
Yeah.
And I think Brianna was definitely thinking that was a possibility.
Yeah. And this could be the fact that we got to see the previews at the end, but I'm definitely thinking that was Stephen Bonnet, because he was just gone way too long. But what I loved about the sequence in general is that we had a moment between Brianna and Marsali where they sat down, and Marsali, she didn't understand what Brianna was going through exactly, other than Brianna was saying, he took him. Like, so obviously Marsali knows something is going on. But Marsali brought up the fact that she felt she had killed her father, and that I think it was less about, how our wishes actually control what happens to a person, and more about if you let something sit and bother you, your worst nightmares are going to happen.
Yeah, it was an interesting discussion. She obviously felt responsible for what happened to her father, and I think she was conflicted because on one hand, he was like a brutally abusive person, and then he got arrested, went to jail, and then died in jail. So because she was always wishing and praying that God would take him away, she feels responsible for what happened.
He got arrested for being a Jacobite. But yeah, and at first, I almost thought she was going to tell Brianna that she literally killed her
I
father.
thought so too.
And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Because here's the thing. No one would blame her for killing a man out of defense if he's attacking her. But then to have that extra reveal that it was more of Marsali just believing because she had wished this upon someone that it happened. But I think it was her point of the power of thought and what that can do to a person.
How powerful that is. Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was I appreciated that we were seeing more with Brianna. We know that Roger is going to bring Claire back because of what we know, with the tonsils, and that they're on their way eventually. But okay, so we had that, and then just getting back to what we had with Alicia and Morton. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, but surprisingly to Claire and Jamie, he comes back. But he comes back only after Alicia tries to actually kill herself. Yeah. Yes. I think, here's my thing, is that I understand she's young. I don't think it was about Morton, though, exactly. I think that Alicia just felt very alone.
I think she's in love with this man, clearly, and she's doing anything she can to get his attention, and to keep his attention, albeit, it's a little extreme.
Yeah.
But then love, when you're in love,
yeah.
you do crazy things.
Yeah, and I think that just going back, she hinted to Claire that she didn't want to live, and she said directly, "I don't have anybody." So, and I think part of it what we don't get is that this idea that she was pregnant and that there wouldn't be a husband because he ran off. I think that was more of a contributor than we realize because we don't see it as much in the show. We don't really get her internal monologue or perspective, or really, or Claire's internal monologue, which would tell us what she presumed Alicia was thinking.
Correct. Well, I think Alicia, it's not a question of whether or not she wants to live. She wants to live, but she doesn't want to live without the man she loves.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a situation where to give birth to a child with no husband in this society is one of the worst things that could happen.
Yes, it's shameful.
Yeah, and she kept mentioning how she was a disgrace to her family.
Well, that's what they told her.
Yeah.
If, under the circumstances. So, that was the culture of the day.
Okay, I'm just going to check in and read a couple of comments here. Knitting Queen asks, do you think Jamie having Roger take Claire and the boys home as him trusting him more? What do you think about that?
I think it's more about the bigger picture, is getting the boys help versus whether or not he trusts Roger. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of choices or options for people to actually, go with the boys to accompany them on the journey.
I think that when I have this picture of Jamie in my head that is very different. Like when he's around Roger, I feel like Jamie becomes like the older man who
I agree.
Can never do anything wrong. And like, as they said on the after show, like, the producers talking about this, that he's a man among men. And so I feel like that's really what it boils down to, is that Jamie he does have a lot more experience. He grew up in this world fighting. He knows how to handle certain things and how important the morale is for men. But I think we should remember too that Jamie didn't always have this experience, and that if you look back at season 1, there were many times he made mistakes.
Yes, but he grew into it.
Exactly.
Right.
And like and so now I feel like he's holding Roger to a higher standard, even though Roger 1 is not from this world and 2 is significantly younger than him.
He's younger, and I don't think he likes someone controlling him. He's a free spirit.
Yeah. And we know from season 4 that Roger wants to be seen as a man equal to any other man. So it's just, I feel bad for Roger, but I also don't think that this is really his place to be a captain and to be thrown into this without someone who has more experience.
I agree.
Yeah. Gracie and Ryan, Jamie is the jock, Roger is the nerd, Elizabeth Brown, Jamie is the king of men. Yeah. So, all right, the final thing to really talk about here is we get this scene where everything is kind of resolved between Morton and Alicia, and kind of, because they end up sneaking them out. What do you think is going to come of all of this? Or what did you think about that moment when they snuck them out?
Well, I think that it was probably the best thing for them to do.
Yeah.
I don't know that, in terms of the bigger picture, if that was the right thing to do, but that remains to be seen. I really couldn't get a handle on.
Yeah. My problem was, okay, why are they sneaking? First of all, it was daylight when they snuck Morton out, and I'm trying to understand this. I'm not trying to be critical of their decision, but I'm just thinking, if it were me and I was sneaking somebody out, I would disguise them or do it in the night.
In the middle of the night. Why would you do it during the daytime?
Unless
that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And because it really cut it close. Or maybe they wanted to do it in the day so they could see more easily in case there was a guard. But if you're going to do it in the day, I still feel like, somehow disguise this man. Take him, a different route. But so that was my only comment on that.
There must be a bigger purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me just check in with the chat one more time. Oh, Elizabeth Brown. Wow, Alicia Brown. Elizabeth Brown says, book Roger is a bit better. It was night in the book. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the book in a second, but before we get to our special segments, Lee, did you have any other final thoughts that you wanted to talk about for this episode?
No, I'm excited to see what happens with the baby, and I still think Fanny is coming back. I know that's for our predictions later, but I think we're going to see a little more of her. She's going to return, and the father, I'm waiting for that father to show up in one of the scenes of the baby.
Oh.
Fanny's baby's father.
So yeah, and we'll talk about that more in predictions. But let's go ahead and jump to our page to screen segment, because there's a lot. I'm going to try and hit on as much as I can. Here's the thing with the book. It's a lot of sometimes they change significant pieces. Sometimes it's very minor details too. But one of the things I want to mention right up front is that this whole situation with Roger, we get his point of view from the beginning where he has the run-in with the Browns. And the point of view we get from Roger is that he actually is struggling with the decision to turn Morton over, and he doesn't know what to do. And what Roger ends up deciding, this is like the cliffhanger of the chapter, he ends up saying that it's best for him to wait for Jamie to get there before he makes any kind of decision like that. So very different. And like, as Elizabeth said, the relationship, are there things between Jamie and Roger that might be a little complicated in the book? Yes, and like, there's certain things they might not understand about each other, but I'm feeling and seeing more of a Jamie, I don't even want to say dislike of Roger, because I don't think show Jamie dislikes Roger. I just think that he's protective of his family, and this is, as someone said in the chat last week, I think that Roger just feels a lot more like Frank, and maybe it's a subconscious thing with Jamie, that's why he's treating him that way. But in the book, it's different. They do not have that issue where Jamie basically berates Roger for his decision. So, and then the other thing was that specifically Roger said Morton was a member of the militia, and therefore, he assumed, entitled to its protection. Roger couldn't very well turn him over to the Browns, no matter what he'd done, always assuming he could be caught. So then we had this, then it jumps back to the scene with Mrs. Beardsley, which we saw this in last week's episode, but in the scene, Claire does not give birth to the baby. Mrs. Beardsley has the baby in the night. In the morning, this is in the woods too, and in the morning she's gone, and that's it. There's a couple other little things I won't mention, but then the other big thing is we already mentioned about the English law and the baby, and that the baby would inherit Beardsley's property just because he was born, the Mrs. Beardsley had the baby. Elizabeth Brown, I'm going to give her credit for this because she mentioned this, and that was another thing I was going to say, is that Elizabeth Also, Jamie was not upset with Roger when he arrived in Brownsville. The couple didn't lose their child. I think it was a boy. He was fine. And Elizabeth also says Alicia tried to kill herself by freezing to death, but they had to change that because it wasn't winter. Yeah, that's the other thing in the book, is that they make it a point to mention the ice, the snow. Jamie is still sick at this point. So just a little, like, you know, tweaks here and there, and just they kind of move things out of order. So, yeah, we'll talk more next week about that. With the time that we have left, let's jump to our predictions.
Your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Lee, what would you like to say?
So I think I shared a little bit about the baby and Fanny. I think Fanny's coming back. Definitely. I think she's going to miss her baby.
Yeah.
And I also think the father of that baby is going to show up pretty soon.
I think, yeah.
And probably start, once he finds out, somehow, I don't know how he's going to find out he has a child, but I think he's going to want that baby.
Yeah. I think so too. I think that we're going to definitely see more with Fanny, even if it's not to come back and get her baby. I think we're still going to see her at some point and maybe see how she now lives with her decision to give up her child in that, you know, without even telling anyone, just you know, abandoning the child and leaving. I think that we're going to see her again. With Brianna, I feel like I'm cheating because we saw the preview where we see like a little gem and we find out, they say, oh, this is Stephen Bonnet. So based on that very big clue, I'm going to guess that it was Stephen Bonnet who showed up at the house when Brianna was running around looking for Jemmy. I bet that Stephen actually had the baby. I'm almost wondering, like, took the baby away from the house. I'm almost wondering if Stephen came with the ball, and that's how he lured the child out. And so when we saw, you know, basically they kept saying ball, I think that's why. And I also think that it was maybe, like, it's interesting because watching it on screen, it feels like it's only a few seconds that Jemmy's gone. I feel like it was longer.
Like a lifetime.
Yeah, I feel like the reality is it was probably longer than what we saw on screen. And so I feel like Stephen is just kind of lurking about and ready to, you know, have a relationship with who he believes to be his child. And one of the things I just want to mention is that a couple episodes ago, we have been talking about how it's definitely not Roger's child. And, well, okay, let me delete that because that's not exactly what we were saying. It was the point that we were saying we most likely believed it was not, Jemmy's not Roger's child, but I just want to clarify that we're not 100% sure on that because we don't know, and there's always a chance that Jemmy is Roger's. So, yeah, that's my other prediction, that Jemmy is not actually Stephen Bonnet's child.
Well, they didn't have DNA tests back then, so.
Yeah. So, all right. I think that's about it for the episode. Lee, where can everybody find you?
You can find me at 50plusandfabulous.com. or 50plus and fabulous at Lee Broadway on Twitter. You can also find me on Instagram at 50_plus_and_fabulous.
Awesome. And I'm Rachel Goodman. You can find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman or on my author Instagram account at Rachel Radner Author. If you're a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Stumptown, Narcos Mexico Season 2, or if you really enjoy movies, I'm on those panels plus Retro Anatomy of a Movie. Until next week, we will talk to you all later. Bye, everyone.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.